Welcome to the City Current Show, powered by Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services.
This show focuses on sharing good news and powering the good in our community. Now here's your host, City Current CEO, Jeremy Park.
Welcome back to the City Current Show, powered by Higginbotham. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And in this case, we're diving into communication. We have podcasting. We have so much more to discuss. We're talking with Dave Delaney, communication strategist, founder of Futureforth, and host of the ADHD Wise Squirrels podcast. How are you doing?
I'm amazing, Jeremy. Thanks a million for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, when you talk about you doing workshops and keynote presentations, diving into this world of communication, let's start with a little bit of your background and how you got into that, and then we'll even talk about the podcast later on. So give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, so communication is really the umbrella that everything I do sits under. So, for example, as you mentioned, I'm a keynote speaker. So I've been speaking for, over 15 years now and delivering keynotes and presentations and workshops. Before that, I studied improv with Second City in Toronto, where I'm originally from. I've been in Nashville nearly 20 years now, which is crazy to think. Long enough to say a and y'all. And sometimes in the same sentence, it's odd. Yeah, so I've always worked in some communications capacity, whether it's traditionally in marketing, promotions, publicity. But now, as a speaker, a trainer, a coach as well, I help individuals and companies improve how they communicate, whether it's internally through helping teams improve communications and relationships and all that good stuff, or whether it's externally to, promoting companies, products, services, quite an array of stuff. And then, as you mentioned, I have a little podcast I do too.
Talk about how improv weaves into this, because I think that's one of those unique skill sets, because you got to think on your feet. It's all about communication. It's about being in the moment. So talk about how your improv experience kind of weaves into everything you do as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I graduated from Second City in Toronto and then moved to London, started performing improv in London a little bit, and then moved to Ireland and started my own improv troupe where I lived in Galway, Ireland for a couple of years, which is where I met my wife, who is from Jackson, Tennessee, of course. Right. Of course. That's what a nice Canadian lad does, goes to Ireland to meet his future wife from Tennessee, which is why I live in Nashville. But I digress. So the thing with improv is, probably my flagship, my most popular signature keynote presentation is one called The Master Communicator's Secret Weapon. And the reveal to the audience is that secret weapon is improv, although I don't like to pitch it ahead. I don't like to mention it ahead of time because sometimes, maybe they've been to kind of not a great improv show, or they think, some person is going to get up there and make them all come on stage and make them embarrassed. And that's not what I do. So there are core concepts from improv that improvisers learn that can be applied to how you communicate with friends, family, colleagues, and so forth. The three core concepts that I teach, there's more, but the three core ones are active listening. So how to actually really listen to the people that you're connecting with. That also comes in part from my book, New Business Networking, which is very much about networking nicely, not icky networking. Ew, we don't like that. The second is to overcome a fear of failure, because that leads to innovation. People, take risks, good risks, smart risks. And then the third thing is to lead with acceptance. And especially nowadays, I think we can all be more empathetic. I think we can all do a better job at leading with acceptance. And so I teach some skills from improv and how to accept what's given to you, opportunities at work and so forth. And then how to, as a leader, how to empower your people or even a colleague. So, and please excuse the thunder in the background. Of course, summertime in Tennessee, right?
It's all part of it. A little improv on the weather too, right?
That life is one big improv, as Henry Rollins says. And as long as my lights stay on, I will be happy, right?
Where do you like to begin when you're sitting down with a client and you're talking about the workshops, the presentations, the keynotes, and even weaving in the book and in the podcast too? what are the questions you like to ask? What are the things that you're trying to kind of get to the bottom of in terms of what the real challenges are so that you know how to, bring in a solution and where you like to start? So in other words, where does it start for you?
Right. It starts with the problem. But even before that, I become much more mindful on focusing on the problem and determining what that problem is. And first, can I help this person? And if not, do I know somebody in my network who can help this person? Because networking is a two-way street. I believe it's all about karma if you want. It's about planting seeds, but it's about finding ways to serve your community, help other people first and foremost, maybe not getting anything in return, and that's okay. So what I do is as I'm speaking with somebody, my goal is to find out where their challenges are, what their problem is. And it's partly also because I have quite a vast, deep background in many different facets. For example, I was a speaker for Google for nearly 6 years. And so I would travel the US and Canada representing Google, teaching people how to use, Google products and services. I mention that because I need to know what the problem is, what the challenge is that you're facing right now, in order to know, as I said, whether I have something that can help you. And I'm sure we'll talk about the podcast a little bit, but part of my challenge in the past has been, while I wrote my book, and have a chapter about active listening, and while I try to practice what I preach, I've gotten much better at active listening over the last couple of years, much longer. I always joke that like when I teach people how to use active listening and how to properly listen to the people you're communicating with, my wife, if she's next to me, will elbow me in the stomach like, yeah, right. So, we can all do better in a lot of different facets, but that's what I'm looking for when I speak to somebody is what is their problem?
And I think we can all relate to that part of it in terms of marriage and, not being accused of not listening properly. So carry that into one takeaway from the book, because, we talk about it on our end, especially as an event-driven organization. We talk about events, media, and philanthropy to power the good.
Yes.
Hosting a lot of events, it's a lot of networking, it's relationship building, but it's with a purpose. And to your point, not transactional, not sharks in the water, just passing a bunch of business cards, not that icky feeling. It's about how do you transcend business, work together to create real relationships that do lead to growth in business and community, but ultimately, how do you do it in a tasteful and professional way? So share maybe one kind of takeaway, a teaser from your book.
So one big thing I recommend doing is taking notes. Now, culturally, this could be a problem if you're networking with people from different countries or different continents, even. So, like Asia, for example, if somebody from China or Japan or somewhere gives you a business card, you need to accept it with both, and they're from there. You need to accept it with both hands. You need to really study the card and don't just like throw it in your pocket like a lot of us would do. The thing that I recommend doing is as you get someone's business card, and I mean get someone's business card, not by just trying to work a room and get as many cards as you can, because that's useless, but instead, and annoying, by the way. But what you can do is, okay, Jeremy, this is so great. Hey, before we go, give me your card so that way I can get your information and I can follow up with you later. So what I talk about in the book is the three ups of networking. And I have this on futureforth.com and people can check that out there too. The first up is to show up, right? It's very easy not to show up at an event, especially a local networking event. Now, I've run 2 conferences in Nashville. I've run monthly networking events here and elsewhere. And it's so important to show up. And it's difficult. Some nights you're like, oh, I don't want to go. But then you go and you have a good time. So show up. The second is to follow up. If you don't follow up, you're missing out. So when you go to a large conference or a trade show, I did 4 or 5 CESs, the Consumer Electronics Show. That's a lot. A week in Vegas is too much for anybody. And repeat it yearly. Yeah, I get tired thinking about it. But what you want to do is make sure that you follow up, because when you get back to the office on Monday or your home office, you've got a stack of business cards on your desk. They're going to collect dust, and you might have them on your desk right now if you look down, if you're watching or listening to this at the office. The business cards will sit there and you won't do anything with them, and then you'll end up just chucking them out eventually. So So that's part of the follow-up process. And then the third part is to catch up, and I can talk more about that. The reason why I mentioned about the business card etiquette stuff is when you get someone's business card, and you have a quiet moment, or maybe go to the bathroom or whatever you need to do, go in with a pen, jot down notes about Jeremy, what we talked about. He was wearing glasses and a cool jacket. Anything that will remind you about that person, but also Jeremy's looking for a job, or Jeremy's looking for a new client, or who should I introduce Jeremy to? So that way I write down these little notes on the business card. And that way, when I get back to the office and I'm doing that follow up, which is so essential, I can then remember, oh, okay, I got to connect Jeremy with so and so, or send him that recipe for that salmon, which is just delicious.
What's funny is you're talking about something that I talk to a lot of CEOs even on this show, and they do that exact same thing. And we were talking about it in the context of, now with the touches and the phones and being able to share it electronically. And so many, especially, of the CEOs said, no, I prefer actually having the physical card because I want to write down some of the notes and then be able to carry that back. Whereas if I'm just pinging the phones and I get it, dropped in, I may not remember your name. So yes, it's in my phone, but that doesn't mean diddly squat if I can't remember and I can't jot down and have that physical takeaway to then be able to follow up. And so to your point, it's amazing, and obviously, some of this changes with generations, but the reality is having a physical business card allows you to take those notes. And for others, especially those CEOs that you're trying to get to, the decision makers, they prefer it. So yeah, great advice.
It's helpful because also, you don't even need to bring your own business cards in a way, right? Because the goal isn't for you to give everybody a card, because they may not know this following up piece of it, and they may not follow up. And really, when you give everybody a card of your card, you're really just hoping they follow up. But if you have their card, then the ball's in your court to follow up and do it properly and timely. The other thing, as you pointed out too, is and I wish this show was longer because I've got a great crazy story about being really embarrassed about meeting a couple who are much younger, and I almost ruined everything by trying to give them a business card after we connected when they asked me, what's your Instagram? And I'm like, oh, I'm Dave Delaney on Instagram. I've got a couple thousand followers. So yeah, you can find me there. But man, I almost blew it. So I get, culturally, age wise, generationally, a lot of younger people are not doing business cards. But honestly, if you want to stand out, I mean, there's so many overnight prints, Vista prints, great places in Tennessee where you can print business cards on the cheap, help support a local business. And honestly, having something tangible that is not digital is so important, because when you get back to your office and you sit down or you get home at night and you empty your pockets, you'll find that business card and remember. I'm telling you right now, if you connect to that person on LinkedIn, and there's a QR code scanner built into LinkedIn's app that nobody knows about, which I always blow people's minds when I show them this. And I posted about that. So you can feel free to reach out about any of this stuff, anybody. But I mentioned that because if you connect with a person on LinkedIn, or you scan their fancy metal business card or whatever it is, and it adds them to your contacts, you're not going to remember to follow up with them. And now you've got to take the extra step of going into the notes app, let's say, and writing down, met Jeremy, connected with him, follow up about the salmon recipe or whatever. Clearly I'm craving salmon for some reason. So that's why I still believe in the power of business cards. And ultimately too, if you're much younger or newer in your career, if you want to stand out, especially to like an older business decision maker who are often older, they may appreciate a business card. So you're not doing it for you, you're doing it for them to make it easy. So
yeah. And all of this flows through the theme of communication, right? So I think all of this ties into the theme that we're talking about. So let's go ahead and dive into the podcast. And so, as we mentioned, host ADHD Wise Squirrels podcast with Dave Delaney. Talk about this podcast.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with ADHD a couple of years ago, and being a prolific content creator, and I've been online since running a BBS on my Commodore 64, which dates me a little, sort of pre-internet, if you will. I also have been podcasting for 20 years. I started podcasting in 2005. And had I known back then that I had ADHD, it would have been an ADHD podcast. And then all these years later, I'd have Joe Rogan money, but sadly not. Um, but I mentioned this because I started the podcast Wise Squirrels. You can find it at wisesquirrels.com. And the podcast is all about helping late diagnosed adults with ADHD like myself. I'm basically very transparent. I'm very authentic, cliches aside, I really am. And I'm living and learning out loud as I interview subject matter experts, entrepreneurs, actors, all sorts of people who are experts on the topic of ADHD, which is something that's often very misunderstood. One of the biggest misunderstandings is the line, everybody's a little ADHD sometimes. And I always reply, yeah, everybody's a little pregnant sometimes, or everybody's a little Italian sometimes. No, you're either Italian or you're not. You're either pregnant or you're not. And you're either ADHD or you're not. And so I've learned a ton about it, so much so that my ADHD coach said, Dave, you know more than I do at this point. So I become, as I say, hyper focused on the topic. And so ADHD is interesting. I've learned that with undiagnosed and untreated ADHD, your life expectancy can be up to 13 years less. I've also learned that ADHD is about as heritable as height. So that means that if one of your children has ADHD, there's a high chance that you or your spouse has ADHD or both. That also means that one or both of your parents probably have ADHD as well, which can really help with healing. And if you face trauma growing up, yeah, so that's a big part of this. So it's also, while I am treated for ADHD, both, through stimulants, which are, non-addictive and helpful. I always preface everything I say on the podcast, I'll say it here too, is that I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one on the internet. So just to be clear. But yeah, I've learned a lot, and I do encourage people, even if you think you might, if you go to wisesquirrels.com, there's a free assessment there. I don't see the results, but it's a good starting point. And then talk to your doctor. And the other thing I will add very quickly as I ramble on here is when you speak with your doctor, regardless, ask them what their thoughts are on ADHD. Because if they say, oh, everybody has a little, because there's still quacks out there, or they say it's over diagnosed or it doesn't exist or whatever, if they say that, it's time to get a new doctor. Another quick thing I'll mention is ADD, which is often confused. If someone says I have ADD, it just means they were diagnosed probably a lot longer, because ADD changed names to ADHD to keep us confused.
Always got to keep you on your toes. Give me one recent guest and something that they shared with you that was helpful to you. So in other words, give us a little bit of who is a recent guest that stands out that was helpful to you?
Oh my gosh, so many. I mean, right away, I'll go to one of my favorite guests who is not an ADHD expert, and who admitted that right at the get-go. But it was Joseph Goldstein. And if people are familiar with meditation, mindfulness, Joseph Goldstein was one of really three Americans who brought mindfulness meditation from the West to the West. He's now 82. He was just an absolute joy. This is a man who has spent a total of 10 years in silent retreat, and who studied and learned from the masters of ADHD, or excuse me, of meditation, from India and Tibet and all sorts of other incredible places. So just amazing. And the reason why I bring him up is because I started my daily mindfulness or meditation practice in 2020 when, the world was imploding. And plus we had a tornado, knock us out of our house for 3 months. In addition to, a little pesky pandemic. It was a pretty stressful time for everyone, needless to say. So in 2020, this is before I was diagnosed, I started a mindfulness meditation practice. I quit drinking, so I've been sober for 5 years. I just started taking my health more seriously because I was just very stressed out, very anxious with everything. And I have found meditation to be one of the most rewarding things. In addition, for me with ADHD, in addition to medication in addition to therapy. But meditation mindfulness has been just an eye opener and a game changer. And Joseph Goldstein was just an incredible guest. So if anybody, if you have an interest in meditation, regardless of ADHD or not, definitely you want to listen to that episode because it was incredible.
Wrap up with where we can go to learn more about you as a speaker with the keynotes and the seminars. Obviously, listen and follow the podcast. So where do we go on both sides?
If you Google Dave Delaney, I'll come up probably, hopefully on the top. But yes, probably the best place is if you go to davedelaney.me, that's where you can find links to everything. Futureforth is my business, and that's where I do my coaching, consulting, keynote speeches, workshops, all that good stuff. And I'm always looking for opportunities to help companies. I didn't even talk about AI and how using AI can help with communication. So there's lots of topics to talk about there. And then Wise Squirrels, if you're listening to this on YouTube or watching on YouTube or listening on a podcast player, just search ADHD Wise Squirrels and it will come up quickly. And I call it that, by the way, because wise is from the wisdom that we've accrued through our lives, masking and developing coping mechanisms really unknowingly because of our ADHD that we didn't know we had. And then squirrels because squirrel.
Very appropriate.
Yeah. And for those not familiar, watch the movie Up. But that is the ADHD meme of the year is the squirrel. But actually, strangely enough, ADHDers and squirrels do have quite a lot in common, both good and not as good. So throw that out there.
Well, Dave, absolutely a pleasure. Thank you for all you do to power the good. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, Jeremy, this has been so great. I invite everybody to reach out and say hello. Thanks.
Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services is proud to power the City Current Show. We're a people-first company that protects what matters most, the families, businesses, and trailblazers that keep our community going. As one of the nation's top independent insurance firms, Higginbotham is a single-source solution for business insurance, employee benefits, HR services, and personal insurance that's customized for you. We're here to serve you, the people you care about, and your community. Call 866-377-1959 or visit higginbotham.com.